Janna Morishima. How are you today?
I'm great.
Excellent. I'm glad to have you on. As I mentioned, been looking forward to this for a while. Um, you got quite a bit of history in the work that you have been doing,
hmm
and I'm interested in diving into some of that. But first, let me go ahead and give the audience a brief introduction for you so they get a feel for who you are before we get into this discussion.
hmm
You are the co-founder of Scholastic Graphix imprint. You helped launch the graphic novel imprint during your time at Scholastic, marking a pivotal shift in children's publishing and a foundational step in your career. You're the director of the kids group at Diamond Book Distributors, where you oversaw business development for major comic publishers such as Marvel, Dark Horse, Oni Press, and IDW, helping them navigate the children's book market. You're the founder of Kids Comics Unite, where you created a thriving online community for kids and young adult graphic novel creators, offering support, events, and resources. You launched your own literary and illustration agency, Janna Co., in January of 2020, where you specialize in representing children's and young adult graphic novelists and visual storytellers with an initial roster of diverse creators. And you led the literacy initiative NYC Reads 365, where you partnered with NYC Department of Education to launch and run this program, reinforcing your commitment to children's literacy. That is quite a career.
Well, one thing I want to say is you used the word oversaw when I was at Diamond, and I want to clarify that um, I wouldn't call it that.
Okay.
I would say that I offered advice to those publishers, but I wasn't
Okay.
overseeing anything that they were doing.
Gotcha. So would you say you were advising?
Yes,
Got
advising.
it. Okay. Very good. Very good. Um, as I mentioned before we got on, I don't have a whole lot of structure other than my very first question, which takes us all the way back in time to where were you born and what was life like as a kid for Jenna?
Oh, okay. I was born in Washington, D.C. Um, my parents worked for the government. My mother became a stay-at-home mom right after I was born. So yeah, DC government kid.
Okay.
And then we moved to Germany when I was just finishing up kindergarten, going into first grade. And I would say, harkening back to what you and I were just talking about before the podcast started about childhood influences, that
Yeah.
was a very, very huge culture shock moment for me, moving from the United States to Germany.
Yeah.
And um, we lived in a small village, a German village, but I went to school on a US Army base. So I would
Okay.
take the bus to the Army base every day and then come back. And the place where I lived, I didn't have any friends nearby, and all the kids who did live nearby spoke German. And when I initially got there, I didn't speak any German. So I was very, very alone. And I have a younger sister.
Okay.
So at least I had my sibling, but I would say that I spent a lot of time by myself and kind of lonely at that age. And that is really when I became a voracious reader. Although I've always been a reader. Even when I was like a toddler, I think I was attracted to books.
Okay.
Um, and I guess I just have such strong memories of being a kid and being in a corner reading a book and feeling like I was talking to the person who was writing the book, like they were telling me about their lives, and in my head I was replying about my life. And
Interesting.
yeah, and then after 3 years in Germany, we moved back to the United States when I was in fourth grade. And again, it was like a culture shock experience because I think at that age, like 6, 7, 8 years old, that's when you're really maturing
Yeah.
intellectually to some extent. And I think being in Europe and ex having living in a small village in Europe, things became kind of normal to me. And then when I moved back to the suburbs in the United States, what the kids were into and what they talked about was completely foreign to me. So once
Yeah.
again, I felt like I had to like reintegrate into society. It's not as extreme, I think, as moving from, say, like an African country to the United States.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but at any rate, so then um, I guess okay. Then I did finally get reintegrated into American society, but still, I think that my experience being in Europe, and actually one thing that happened when I was in Europe is that my father brought a lot of comics home that I don't even know where he got them, but there
Okay.
must have been some bookstore or some place where he was able to get English language comics. And they were
Got it.
mainly actually translations of French comics, so like Tintin and Asterix,
Oh, wow. All
things
right.
like that. So I
Yeah.
read those and I really loved reading comics. But then when I came back to the United States, there weren't comics like that. There was like
Right.
Superman and Spider-Man and Batman
Batman.
and all that stuff, which I
Yeah.
had like zero interest in. So
Right.
I kind of dropped comics hot potato. Um, and it wasn't until I was in my 20s and working that some events happened that kind of reintroduced comics to me, and I suddenly realized, oh, wait a minute, this is this is not a genre. I think a lot of Americans think of comics as a genre, which is like
Right.
superheroes.
Yeah.
But comics is just a storytelling medium, and any
Correct.
type of story can be told in comics. It
Yeah.
could be history, or it could be romance, or it could be mystery, it could be a memoir, like literally anything. Um,
Yeah.
it could be a how-to manual, you know?
Right.
So I got so excited about it, and I happened to be working at Scholastic at the time, and so that's how the ball really got rolling with starting the graphics imprint.
Okay. When you were a kid, did you have much interaction with your grandparents on either side of the family?
That's a really interesting question. Not a lot. My
Okay.
Both my parents moved away from their families. Um, my father was from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan
Okay.
and grew up in a very, very rural area.
Okay.
And he had, I would say, some really difficult experiences in his childhood. His mother, well, really, he was a late teenager when it happened, but his mother got a brain tumor and she died. And then he had four younger siblings, and I
Oh,
think
wow.
it must have been a very traumatic experience.
For sure.
So for whatever reasons, both of my parents were, well, I think estranged is much too strong of a word, but like they didn't go back and visit. So as
Yeah.
a childhood, I didn't really grow up with grandparents or
Okay.
with an extended family. And actually, it's really interesting you asking that question because I feel like that's something all my life that I romanticized, and
Yeah.
like I was jealous of other kids who had grandparents who were very much a part of their life. And I have strong memories of some of my friends' grandparents, like going
Hmm.
to their house, having a play date, and like seeing the grandmother there. One of my
Yeah.
earliest memories, I think, is making Christmas cookies with one of my friends and her grandmother. And like just,
Okay.
I really remember this grandmother and how she talked to her granddaughter. So yeah, it must have really seared into my brain.
Well, I can imagine. I can imagine. And this is part of the discussion that comes out usually in every episode too, is the relationship to the grandparents. And what we've seen with most of the guests is that the grandparents have more of an influence on the kids than the parents do in terms of the love and the caring component. Um, and I can imagine everything that you're experiencing with not having that connection early on, and then seeing it
Mhm.
presented at one of your friends' house,
Mhm.
how that would definitely impact you and imprint.
Hmm.
a desire to have that type of connection early on.
Hmm.
Yeah. Did um, anyone else in the family delve into any of the creative fields at all?
Um, well, let's see. My mother was definitely enjoyed art. She liked painting, but never professionally. I think my mom was liked to make things. She grew up in Colorado and her family was very handy. Um,
Okay.
her father actually built a cabin in the mountains.
Yeah.
Between my two parents, my mother was much more handy than my father, I would say. My father was like me. He was a total bookworm. Uh,
Got
but my mom, uh, you know, sewed things and cooked things and liked to make the house look nice, that kind of thing. So I guess, and I would say both of my parents encouraged me to pursue creative things. So when I was in high school, I did take a bunch of art classes. Like I took an art class at Corcoran School of Art, which was a school of art in DC. Um, and I remember really loving that. I actually wanted to go to art school, and my parents discouraged me from going to art school, which is a very
uh,
common phenomenon.
classic,
Yeah.
classic
Yes,
scenario.
classic.
You're not going to make any money if you go in that
Yeah,
direction.
yeah, yeah.
Um, let's talk a little bit about being in Germany. Was the town that you lived in, was it more of a rural town, kind of countryside-ish, or was it a little bit more established in terms of city feel?
It was definitely more countryside, but
Okay.
the countryside is very different there than in the United States. So I think if you're thinking of like an American small town, it didn't feel like that. It's hard to kind of like put your finger on it, but in Germany, the small towns are tend to be very compact. There's like a little central part of the town, and all the houses are sort of clustered around it, and then there's all the fields kind of surrounding the village. Whereas American small towns can sometimes be like a farmhouse here, and then, a mile down the road, another farmhouse.
Right.
Not like
It,
that.
yeah, the way that I'm looking at it and thinking of it is, the stories that we've seen in movies and whatnot of the small village that you have those houses kind of surrounding the central point of the village, but they are hilly and fields and different things. And I relate that to my family being from down south.
Hmm.
So there is that type of structure still in that area where you can be in just a very small town where there may only be one stop sign or
Hmm.
light, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then everything else surrounding it's a farm or
Hmm.
fields or mountains or hills, those kind of things. That's kind of how I was looking at it. With going from that, I would imagine that would feel pretty peaceful
Hmm.
there in terms of being that contrasted to having to go on to the base. And I would venture to say that that was probably a little bit fast paced,
Hmm.
everything going on. Did you see that as being a bit uncomfortable as that early child as well?
Well, my memories are maybe, I don't know whether they've been repressed, but uh, I know that when I first started taking the bus to the base, that I was very unhappy because my mom has told me that my first grade teacher talked to her and was worried about me. And apparently she invited me to sleep over at her house. This is something that would never happen nowadays. But
Right.
my first grade teacher on the army base saw that I was a student who wasn't doing well, like psychologically,
Yeah.
and she talked to my parents and said, "Could I have her sleep over at my house?" And my parents were like, sure. So I spent the night at her house and I remember she gave me a bubble bath and I really enjoyed it. I just remember like, wow, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah,
Um, and I liked her a lot. I think she really took like a motherly sort of interest
sure.
in me and she just really liked me. So I think after an initial period of being very unhappy, I did acculturate and more or less fine, I guess. And then I remember my third grade teacher who was on the army base, I also really, really liked. I think she might have been from Texas. Um,
Okay.
but she had some kind of an international night where all the families were invited to come in and bring a food from, wherever they were from. And I remember I loved it. I've always loved foods.
Nice.
That and I don't know, I just have I guess, certain people in your life, it's interesting that you're asking me these questions. They imprint on you, even if it was only for a short period. Like
Yes.
I feel like I saw something on social media somewhere where somebody was talking about a single conversation that they had with a stranger years ago that
Yeah.
changed their life.
Yep.
And I think that's amazing. I think if we could all carry that with us and think that we never know something we might say or a smile that we might give to somebody or just listening,
Yeah.
how that is so meaningful because really we don't listen to each other enough.
For sure. For sure. You're 100% right in that thought process. And that is one of the things that I tried to convey with this podcast as well. Is being a little bit kinder, being a little bit more cognizant, also being kind to yourself. A lot of times we're harder on ourselves than we need to be,
Hmm.
and it makes things skewed in terms of a perspective of
Hmm.
it. But yeah, you never know who you're going to come across, and maybe just a smile to
Hmm.
that person at that moment in time changes their whole day completely.
Hmm.
And they could have been having the worst day whatsoever, thinking that the world was ready to end for them and it wasn't going to get any better. And somebody just kindly smiled as they walked past. That changes everything.
Hmm. It
Yeah,
does.
it's wonderful that people are able to experience those. And you're right, it does imprint. And again, too, I've seen it across the interviews that there are those storylines. That's why I'm asking the way I'm asking because I want to see it, continue to play out because I think they're pivotal moments. They're
Hmm.
pivotal moments, especially as children,
Hmm.
that give us a sense of comfort in a scenario where it may be completely uncomfortable for us in every other aspect of what's going on in our life.
Hmm.
With having to navigate between English classes on the base
Hmm.
and trying to communicate with some kids that are just within the village. Did that take quite a while for you to get acclimated to, or were you able to pick up on some of the stuff?
Honestly, I would say I never really did make any friends, any German
Okay.
friends in the village because, mm, well, it's hard. I mean, I didn't go to school there, and there was one little girl who lived near us who became friends with my younger sister because my younger sister did go to the German nursery school.
Okay.
Um, so she actually learned German better than I did. But ironically, I still speak German and my sister doesn't, which is really funny because I studied it in high school and college and then yeah, went on with it in various ways. But so I would say the only German kid that I interacted with regularly was my sister's friend, really.
Okay. And was that a close connection that you had with her, or was
Not
it just a
really. No.
friend?
Yeah, it was really my sister's friend. I do remember going to her house a few times, and I remember like the tastes and the smells in the house. I
Okay.
remember her mother gave us sweet mint tea to drink. And again, like that, the sensory experiences you have as a child can be very powerful. So
Yeah.
ever since then, when I drink sweetened mint tea, I remember that girl's house.
Yeah. Nice. Having to come all the way back to the States and having this culture shock again, um, how was it incorporating now into the American school system for you? Were you, as you kind of described, the kid who was kind of off, to yourself? Was that most of the case through elementary school for you, or were you able to connect with a certain number of individuals that you may have at least had a core group of friends?
Well, when we came back, I started hanging out again with the girl who had been my best friend in kindergarten.
Okay.
And we basically became best friends. But there was tension because she also had another best friend who was not my friend. So that was a little challenging. And I would say the second half of elementary school through junior high was just a very challenging period for me. I
Yeah.
was really, really shy.
Okay.
And I think I have a funny personality, although my theory is that it's actually not as uncommon as people think. I am a shy person who's very extroverted.
Okay.
And the classic definition of extroversion versus introversion is like, where do you get your energy? And I
Yeah.
get my energy from being around other people. I love talking to people and connecting with people. Whereas a
Yeah.
classic introvert, they might be able to do it very well, but it kind of drains them and they need that time to recharge after being out and about with a bunch of people. So I think the reason why elementary school and junior high was so difficult for me is because I was really shy and I didn't have the social skills yet to know how to break out of my shell, but I was
Mhm.
so lonely. And it's in fifth grade, it was really, really bad. Um, I went through this period. Since we're talking about mental health, I don't think about it often, but I went through a period where I couldn't think of myself in the first person. When I
Really?
saw it in my head, I was like, Jana's doing this, Jana's going to school, Jana's, doing her homework or whatever. It was really bizarre. And I started like panicking because I couldn't think of myself in the first person. And
Yeah.
I went to my parents once to try to tell them about it. And they looked so confused and like, what the heck is she talking about? That I just shut down. I just was like, I'm not going
Okay.
to talk to them about it because they don't
Yeah.
understand. So
Yeah.
So I actually kind of suppressed it and never I've like I started I don't know when I remembered this, but at some point when I got older, I remembered it happening.
Yeah.
Um, and nothing ever really came of it. I mean, I guess it shifted eventually and I went back to being able to think of myself in the first person. But I
Right.
think that was just a really strong manifestation of how out of step I felt.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Totally understandable. You, did you did you have a sense of uh, being able to feel things deeply at that point in time as well? And you mentioned with your reading that it was almost as if you were having a continued conversation with whoever had written the
Mhm.
book. I'm guessing that you may have had a little bit more feeling in terms of um, things that were magical or creative type things.
Yeah, I would say both in terms of imagination and also in terms of empathy or,
Yeah,
you know, paying a lot of attention to what other people were feeling. And um, being really upset when I saw things that were hurtful or
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think that plays into that scenario of not being able to think of yourself as I or me and just using your name as
Mhm.
this is how she's experiencing it.
Mhm.
So it's essentially as if you were in that book
Mhm.
having that
Yeah,
conversation,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yes.
And you're like, wait a minute, this character over here, who
Yes.
really is me, but this character is not doing well.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Interesting. Once you got into sixth grade, seventh grade, did those things start to shift for you, or did you see more of a change taking place? Because at that point, you're starting to get into that mid
Mhm.
range of adulthood, that puberty age where hormones are going and mindset is changing, and different things could confuse you or set you off. How did that play out for you?
Well, I remember junior high being horrible, like for many people. Uh,
Yes.
Definitely not being a cool kid. Like
Okay. Okay.
I think I was still very naive or arrested development in some way. I remember my mom was still sewing me clothes and I would go to school and I actually really liked the clothes that she sewed me, but when I would go to school, I'd be acutely aware that the what I was wearing wasn't cool and I just didn't look like what the other kids looked like
Right. Right.
and thinking like, well, I probably shouldn't dress like this, but I don't know. Um, oh, I remember that I think like that was when Sweet Valley High was a series that was really popular for girls. And
Yeah.
I was partly curious about it, but partly horrified and that's not for me. Um, but actually, that is also the age when I started getting into theater. So I was doing,
Okay.
I started acting in local community theaters. So I feel like that I had a kind of split existence at that time because at school I felt very uncomfortable and weird, but then I was actually quite capable of public speaking. So like going being on stage kind of brought out this whole other side of my personality.
Yeah.
And I did act in the junior high as well. And um, I had some lead roles. Um, so I guess, yeah, there was this other side that was coming out at the same time.
Okay. Yeah. As I'm seeing it again, it's that little girl who's having the conversation with the author, right?
Yes,
You're able to.
pretending.
Yep. You're able to take on those characters and embody them. Um,
Yeah, one of my roles was actually as a villain, and I loved that role because I am the most unvillainous person you can imagine. But I like kind of pretending and making people laugh and being really expressive. So
yeah. That's great. That's great. I think that I think a lot of times when it's not our natural instinct to do something that would be considered a bit taboo,
Mhm.
when we get the opportunity to experience that, even if it's just through acting,
Mhm.
it brings out a side of us that we're able to express that wouldn't normally take place.
Yeah, yeah, that's really, really true.
Yeah, very interesting. Did you or your sister have any introduction to athletics at all as children?
Oh, not really. I did go to one soccer practice on the army base when I lived in Germany, and the coach threw this soccer ball in my stomach. I said never again.
Oh my gosh.
I did try out for the field hockey team when I was in freshman in high school because
Okay.
I was friends with another girl who was much more athletic than me, and she was going to be on the field hockey team. And so I played on the team for the first year, and I think I was the worst athlete in the history. of humanity. I'm just absolutely have no skills in that area at all.
Okay.
So it's a
And
miracle that I even lasted through the season.
got you. Well, you know, thinking about that soccer coach talking about impressions individuals have
Yeah.
on us,
Yeah.
I imagine that was very much an impression of, I do not want to do this.
Yeah. But actually, my daughter now is an athlete. So,
Okay.
and she's been super coordinated and flexible and adept in that area since she was born, basically. And it's been so enlightening to me
Okay.
watching her progress through and being taking her to practice all the time and seeing what you learn from being on a team. And now I
Yeah,
totally get why people say that athletics is such an amazing experience for kids because
sure.
yeah, being part of a team is huge and also like learning how to lose. I think actually that's
Yes.
one of the best lessons of athletics is like you're never going to win all the time and
Right.
coming back from having lost or from failing. Like that is one of the best lessons that you can learn in life, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It sets you up to know that yes, there are going to be disappointments, but they don't have to last.
Hmm.
You can literally change it in a week.
Hmm.
It can change the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
And then if you're able to expand on that and make it go 3 or 4 weeks before you have another disappointment, just
Mhm.
that uh, scenario allows you to look at things differently within the world as well. Because as we know, we experience a lot of disappointments in the world.
Yes, we do.
uh, with that's interesting too about the theater is that you're taking those characters on. Um, I keep drawing that back to that little girl reading the books.
Mhm.
Once you got into high school, let's say 10th, 11th grade, did things start to get a bit more comfortable for you? Were
Oh
you
yeah, things changed
become
dramatically for me.
okay?
And
What did that look like?
I attribute it all to my friends. Basically in ninth grade, I feel like I made a very conscious decision in my head that I'm going to change. I'm going to become a completely different person.
Okay,
Um, and I just wanted to, mm, I guess, I had a crush on some of the boys who I would say were like the rock and rollers or like the punk
okay,
kids,
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
kids who seemed very edgy. I was very
Yes.
attracted to those kids.
Okay,
Um, so, and I had this kind of nice girl, goody two shoes kind of image, or at least that's what I felt like.
all right.
And so I was like, I have to get out of this. What am I going to do? And I happened to meet this girl who moved to our town and was started as a new student in ninth grade. She was in my PE class with me.
Okay,
Um, and to me, she represented like everything I wanted. She was very free-spirited and not shy at all. Um, very friendly and very well developed. I'll say.
I got
And
you.
the boys liked her a lot, a
Yeah,
lot.
all right.
But the funny
Classic.
thing was the girls didn't like her because, well, they didn't like her because all the boys liked her.
Yeah.
Um, but she also moved from, I would say, like a more, not rural, but like not a particularly urban area. And the high school where I was in Bethesda, Maryland, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. Very, very urban area, very international, very
Okay.
professional.
Yeah.
And so she had an accent, and her hair was like not a cool hairstyle, and all this stuff. Um, so so basically, she and I just like bonded. We became really good friends, and she. I was kind of like tagging along with her, like the little ugly duckling that's like getting to go to the parties and stuff because
Uh-huh.
she invited me to come along. And so through her, I met this whole group of people that became my friends for the rest of high school, and they were pretty little wild, I'd say.
All right.
A lot of crazy stuff, and I don't know how my parents ever let me do some of the things that I did. I mean, I'm gonna assume they didn't know what I was doing. Like, oh mom, we're gonna go to the beach for the weekend. I'll see you on Monday. And they'd be like, okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that is a little bit
Yeah, that's a little.
outside the box. That's really outside the box.
Yeah,
What,
yeah. I
what,
think I had such a good reputation that it kind of outlasted my actual behavior.
I was about to say, you probably had an impression that you had built up with your parents that they just essentially trusted you were going to do the things you
They did trust me
needed to do.
in ways that they should not have trusted.
As a parent now, you can see
Yes.
that. Oh, classic, classic. Did with picking up on that relationship and creating that bond that you did, were you able to create the person that you wanted to be at that point in time? Because you
I
said you
I
wanted to
do
change.
feel, yes, I feel like I was the butterfly climbing out of the cocoon, yes, because I
All right.
felt like I could be more myself. Like uh my sense of humor started coming out, and I I just really liked, okay, I'm gonna say something that's I feel like makes it clear that I am not of like the recent generation, but I like I like guys a lot. I really liked hanging out with guys more than girls in high school.
Okay.
It's except for like a few of my close girlfriends. But
Gotcha.
because I felt like they were not judgmental or not as judgmental as girls are. Girls at that age,
Yeah. Yeah.
14, 15, 16 can be the worst.
Sure.
Um, and and I think the way that guys interact with each other or like how they show their emotions tends to come out a lot through a sense of humor,
Yeah.
I think. And I loved that.
Okay.
I've always loved humor as a way to convey emotion or to
Yeah.
convey feelings. And I think actually think in our political situation right now that humor is the way to deal with it.
Yeah.
But but yeah, so I loved that. I mean, you can tell like I'm lighting up just remembering, like
Yeah.
literally just I could just hang out all night and just listen to the banter, the back and forth, and it just I got such a kick out of it. It just made me so happy.
Right. I get. I get it completely, and the reason I say that is because I've always felt more comfortable around girls and
Hmm.
being in their environment than it is for me being around guys. Now, I did play sports, so that guy camaraderie within the sports aspect did play out for me. But
Hmm.
in terms of like being an adult, I find it so much easier to express and communicate around girls versus around a bunch of guys, dudes.
Well, I think that makes total sense because girls are more open about emotions.
Yeah,
Men generally are not. Or
right.
they're like society does not encourage guys to show their emotion.
For
Uh,
sure. And I'm an emotional guy. I'll cry at a commercial if
yeah.
it's good enough. if it's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
if it's a touching commercial, a tear will roll down my eye.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, that's I can relate. And I don't think it doesn't seem weird to me at all. I think a lot of times at those ages, we have a tendency just to move into the environment that feels most comfortable for us and
Hmm.
allows us to be who we are
Hmm.
versus other scenarios where we have to try and put up a facade and just go along and act
Hmm.
accordingly. during this time, you mentioned earlier that you started taking some art classes and stuff like that as well.
Mhm.
Um, what was the variety of those classes, and what was the thing that you really liked the most about them?
Mm. I took creative writing. I remember taking a silk screening class that I really loved.
Okay.
Absolute favorite class in high school was actually, cannot remember what it was called, but it was basically graphic design. The high school I went had a printing press.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, and it was basically like the class where you got to use the printing press. I don't
Yeah.
remember if it was called graphic design or what, but so we actually printed like the directories for the school, and there were other official school materials that we would lay out and then print on the press and bind and all that stuff. Uh,
Got it.
and so it's kind of a combination between making things for the school and then making our own projects. So we made
Oh,
comic books and we made
nice.
scenes and like just random stuff for fun as well.
Right. Gosh, I wish that was still a thing for
Oh
school.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, it again, another scenario of learning how something gets put together and
Yeah.
presented.
Yeah.
I think it would apply across genres of business. Um,
I was listening to a podcast actually this morning, dropping my son off for summer camp. Um, and they were talking about if there's one thing that could help the education system today with kids
yeah,
is more making things, just
right.
making things, because you learn so much
Oh,
from
yeah,
actually making, and it literally doesn't matter what it is that you're making, but that
right.
process of going from A to Z and making mistakes and figuring things out and then going through the inevitable dip that you go through in the middle where you're like, this is so much harder than I thought it would be. But then in the
Yeah,
end, like actually getting to the finish line, whoa, that is so amazing. Such a great, great way to learn.
it is. And I believe it's important from just from the perspective, too, that it, it, it allows your mind to be occupied. I think they've done away with so much in the school systems now, at least public schools for sure, to where kids don't have enough stimulation
Hmm.
about practical things
Hmm.
in life. They're preoccupied with their phones and what's going on there, versus like we're saying here, making something. Even
Hmm.
if they were to build a birdhouse, which
Hmm.
used to be a thing, right? You could build a birdhouse in an art class or in just a regular class, build a birdhouse and paint it, all just that. Learning how to visually see how something looks three dimensionally,
Hmm.
and then now you have to build it. So I've got to make it look like
Hmm.
what I'm seeing three dimensionally. And
Hmm.
there's steps that I need to go through to make that process work. And then when I get to the end of it, all right, well, maybe my roof doesn't sit the right way because I made it
Hmm.
this way. But that process keeps you occupied and focused on things.
Hmm.
And I think that becomes a situation nowadays where we have so much issues with, even more so, with the ADD, the ADHD,
Hmm.
the over stimulated individuals that are coming in that don't have the ability to calm
Hmm.
in an environment because they're just constantly getting barraged with stimulus.
Hmm.
Nothing where they have to really focus in and figure something out and pay attention to it. Um, yeah. The screen printing class, you
Hmm.
said you really like that. Was
Hmm.
that possibly an interest of seeing other things out in society and then being able to actually make something that looked like that in that class.
I don't think that was what appealed to me about it. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, yeah.
I I think I liked the process of designing something like
Okay.
um
And seeing it on a 3D product
yeah. Oh, it was actually 2D. It was just screen printing
or
on paper. Yeah. Yeah,
oh, on
yeah.
paper.
In paper, yeah. hmm
Got you. Okay. So like poster type stuff or art.
hmm
Got it. Okay. I was thinking t-shirts and stuff
Yeah,
like
no, it was just paper.
okay. That even that is interesting. Because then you're
I've always really loved design. Even though I wouldn't consider myself the greatest designer, I actually started in Scholastic in the art department, not in editorial. Um,
okay.
but I really love good design. When I see it, I just, ooh, it's
Yeah,
so awesome.
right. For sure. Um, how about the interpersonal relationships in high school? Did you have a few boyfriends?
Yeah, I had a boyfriend. We started dating in the summer between junior and senior year, and we were together on and off for like 5 years. So it lasted a
Okay.
while. Yeah.
All right. Did that come about from hanging out with the
Yeah.
guys, or was it
Yeah.
somebody else? Okay. So you just worked right in there.
I worked my way in.
Got it. Got it. Did you have any teachers that made a huge impression in high school for you? Because we know you had a few in elementary
Yeah,
school.
definitely in elementary school. I actually had a teacher in junior high who made an indelible imprint on me. He was really a hard ass. He was
Okay.
probably the hardest teacher I ever had. Really high expectations and had a very kind of brusque demeanor. So I was terrified of him. But like by the end of the year, I kind of had figured out that he really did have high expectations because he wanted to draw the most out of us. Like he really cared. Um, and I survived the class and I felt like I learned a lot from him.
Yeah.
So that I never forgot him. And then in high school, I had some teachers I liked, but I wouldn't say that there were any of them that were like mentor figures or anything like that.
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. As you're coming into senior year, are you starting to think about what you're going to do after graduation? Are you contemplating um, college? Are you contemplating what field you want to go into and those types of things?
Yeah, I definitely was going to go to college and um I did really well in school. So my parents, wanted me to go to a good university. I was more interested in going somewhere different. Like I kind of wanted an adventure in some way. So I applied to a bunch of schools and I got into a bunch of schools. And the school that I chose ultimately might have been like, if you had to rank, like the schools I applied to, it was probably towards the bottom.
Okay.
It was actually UC Santa Cruz.
Oh,
Um,
really?
and the reason I ended up there is because I decided to apply to Berkeley. And on the UC application, there's literally just a box you can check and you can be like, I want to apply to Berkeley and UCLA and Santa Barbara and Santa Cruz or
Okay.
whatever ones you wanted to apply to. And
Yeah.
so I knew about Santa Cruz because one of my friends had a stepmother who had gone there and she seemed really cool to me. So I was like, Berkeley, Santa Cruz. Check that box. And
Right.
then when my mom and I went to California to visit the schools. We went to Berkeley and then we went down to Santa Cruz and I was blown away. Like, oh my God, I could go to school by the beach and there's all these surfers here
Okay.
and it's like, oh, that movie had just come out, that vampire movie. Do you remember from the 80s? The Lost Boys?
Lost Wise? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. That is all that all combined in my head and I was like, I'm gonna go to Santa Cruz.
Nice, nice. That, yeah. As soon as you said UC Santa Cruz, all of that flooded in for me. Um, I, Growing up, I was very much into the Santa Cruz skateboard
Hmm.
graphics.
Yep.
Like they always had an impression that was just like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And in my freshman year dorm, there were a lot of skaters.
Was there? Nice, nice. How was that transition for you from the high school environment and culture to now college culture on the West Coast?
Yeah, it was pretty dramatic. I think I sort of quickly started realizing that I was a fish out of water because as much as I was, yeah, like I said, I wanted adventure. I wanted to go somewhere that was really different. I realized pretty quickly once I got there that I'm not really a California girl.
Okay.
I'm a very intellectual nerd, really. So I didn't quite fit in. Luckily, my roommate and I got along really well, and she was actually from a town very close to Santa Cruz, so she was a total California girl through and through.
All
Uh,
right.
and actually, some of my high school friends, I don't even remember the details, but they ended up in California for various reasons, and so I did continue to see them every now and then,
Okay.
which is crazy because it's so
Yeah.
far away from.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't. Yeah, so I actually thought about transferring after I'd spent a year there, but then it didn't end up working out. So I did end up graduating from Santa Cruz.
Okay. And what did you graduate with a degree in?
European history.
Oh wow. Wow. Went all the way back to
I
childhood.
know, it was so crazy. Actually, what I will say is my favorite professor there, he
Uh,
was an influence on me. He was teaching intellectual history, which is kind of like the history of ideas. So
Interesting.
it's kind of like combining philosophy and history,
Yeah.
and teaching or covering how people's mindset or worldview is influenced by the culture that they're in, which to
Yeah.
me was fascinating. So
Sure.
I really loved his classes, and that's why I think I was in the European history major because I just wanted to take all of his classes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very fascinating. Um, yeah. I'm going all the way back to the little girl in the book
Yes.
having the conversation with
Yes.
the author. And then you're in this class where you're learning about all these different histories of philosophy. I imagine you're having a conversation within those studies of, oh, this is interesting. What about this? Or
Mhm,
all these
mhm.
kind of things.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah. When you got to graduation, well, let me stay here just a little while longer. With the getting past the freshman year, and
Mhm,
then starting to feel okay. Now I think I've got a handle on what I'm
mhm,
doing here in this
mhm.
West Coast environment. Did it allow you to start to maybe find yourself a little more of individual identity?
You know what comes into my head is that I actually went in the other direction. I think I started to get more confused again.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I started not really knowing where I was going or what I was doing.
Hmm.
My, well, My junior year, I went to Austria. I did a junior year abroad,
Okay.
living in Vienna, and that was a really difficult year for me, for many reasons. I think I was, still maybe emotionally not fully mature, and it was really scary to go off by myself. And um, my boyfriend at the time was doing a junior year abroad in Paris. And this was the same boyfriend from high school. And he
Okay.
went to college on the East Coast, and I went on the West Coast. And like I said, it was very on and off.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we would see each other. Like I would go to Paris and see him, and that was quite fascinating. I met people that I still am connected to. Um, and uh but it was kind of clear it wasn't really working. I don't know. It like I said, it was a muddle. So I feel like that year was just incredibly emotionally draining for me.
Sure.
And then going back to Santa Cruz, I just felt like I don't really belong here. I just need to graduate as quickly as possible. So I actually graduated early
Okay.
and then left. And really, like, in a way, I never went back to that part of my life, although I'm sure it has stuck around with me in certain ways. Um, and then what happened is that I moved back to DC, not exactly knowing what I wanted to do, but thinking like, I think I'll go to grad school and I will continue with European history and I will become a professor. That was my career
Okay.
goal at that time. And so I was going to take a year off and work. And I got a job working for a consulting company, education consulting company. And I lasted there like I think like 6 months or so. I just the corporate consulting world, there was something about it that didn't work for me. Um, so I quit that and then I got a job teaching in a kindergarten as an assistant teacher.
All right.
And actually I did briefly consider going into early childhood education.
Okay.
I was really interested in like Montessori and Waldorf and alternative education models. Um, but I wasn't really earning enough money to, pay my living expenses. So I got a second job as a nanny. And in that job, I was living in a very wealthy family's house.
Okay.
They had the whole like separate
Wing for you.
wing, yes, for me to live in. Um, So that was quite interesting. Yes, having that experience. And then I applied to grad school and then went into grad school after a year, basically, or a year to, I'm not sure whether it was a year or 2 years that I was working.
Okay. Were you having to work while you were at college too, out on the West Coast,
I did
or
work. I worked in the library.
around
You
the
can see there's
books?
quite a through line here, right?
Yes. We've got a direct one, which is
Yes.
cool. Okay.
I
Once you
actually worked also, I had some other odd jobs, like I worked in a bakery, but I sort of got fired, sort of quit. I'm not sure which it is because my head was too much in the clouds and the owner had to keep reminding me to like do XYZ and so
what again makes sense to me, um, based on the storyline. I could easily see that being the case. You're thinking of everything else but a process.
yes, I wasn't focused on what was right in front of me. I was focused on whatever's going on in my head, I think.
Uh, um, all right. Once you're going to grad school and deciding, all right, this I think is what's gonna create my career.
Mhm.
Um, how's that moving for you?
It was mm, yeah, once again, I think it didn't take me too long to realize that it wasn't the right fit for me. I
Okay.
think the first thing was that I realized, oh, if you're a professor of history, it basically means you have to spend a lot of time in an archive, reading a lot of old material and then like synthesizing it and writing a book about it. And
Yeah.
just the idea of sitting by myself and reading tons and tons of archival material just didn't sound fun to me.
Right.
Um, and then secondly, I also got some kind of bad grades while I was there, and I realized that it was interesting the feedback I got because I got some professors saying to me like, "This is a very creative approach, but it's not really what we were asking for."
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I realized like I wasn't kind of playing exactly by the rules of what I needed to play by in order to succeed in that academic field. And then I kind of thought to myself, well, do I want to play by those rules? Not really.
Yeah.
So then I decided it wasn't for me. So I left after 2 years.
Okay. Once you left, um, did you just try to find a job to pick up? Um,
Yeah. Once again, I was back to square one and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went back to DC again. Oh, and then I was applying for jobs and I got two job offers. And I often think about what would have happened if I had taken the other job offer. So the
okay.
two offers I got, one was working for a documentary film company that made films for PBS about religion and history.
Oh wow.
And then the second job offer was to work for the German press office in DC.
Ah.
And I ended up choosing the first job.
Okay.
And the reason the reason I asked myself, like, what would have happened if I'd gone into that second job is if I had done that second job, I would have been in an environment where I was working with German people
Right.
every day, basically. And I think that would have been really interesting. Like,
For sure.
I've been working with people from outside the United States, but who are in the United States trying to understand the United States.
For sure. I think a lot of Americans are still trying to understand the
Yeah.
United States.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I ended up taking that first job, and that was a roller coaster, because the company I worked for, the owner, who's a really fantastic guy, it was his baby, his company, tiny little company. Um, and he was a film director, producer, the whole shebang. His associate producer, or I guess that was her title, they were ha having a romantic relationship, and it was a very volatile romantic relationship.
Oh wow.
And so I was in this tiny little office working on this creative project with these two people who were having an affair that sometimes wasn't going very well.
Oh man. Oh, a
Yeah,
soap
so
opera.
yeah, it was yeah, challenging to say the least. Um, but through that project, the main film that I worked on was a film about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Have you ever heard of him?
Have not.
He was a German theologian who was part of the anti-Nazi resistance movement in Germany. So,
Okay.
have you heard that there was a plot to kill Hitler from within the German military?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So this guy, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, his brother-in-law was one of those people in that
Okay.
coup attempt.
Right.
Um, So he was very connected to like people in the resistance in Germany, and he's a very well-known theologian for his writings, kind of about the Christian faith in
Okay.
a situation of, I don't know how to describe it, but an indescribable political situation in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
He did end up being killed in a concentration camp.
Oh man.
He got killed actually like shortly before the war ended.
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
Yeah. So it's a fascinating story. Reading his writings is really, probably something we should do today. Um, and for that documentary project, we went to Germany and we interviewed some of the last surviving people who knew him. So we interviewed I think one of his surviving sisters, and we interviewed one of his students.
Okay.
Um, and I'll never forget that interview. This guy was amazing. He was in his 90s or something like that. And um, he was full of life. He just, like we were circling back to what we talked about at the very beginning of the conversation.
Yeah.
He was one of those people you walk into the room and it just like lights up the whole room. He had this wonderful sense of humor. And I was like probably 24 years old or something, and he was 92 or something, but he'd come up to me and like flirt with
Right.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. Just wow.
Yeah, it was so funny and so sweet. But then he was talking during the interviews that we did with him about him being a young man and being in the Hitler Youth movement,
Yeah.
and then encountering Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was leading, I suppose, some underground like Christian circles of some sort, and somehow he ended up going to one of these meetings and basically like completely changing his
Mindset.
and so he joined up with Dietrich Bonhoeffer and um yeah, and I guess that experience made me feel that well, first of all, old people have a lot to teach us. We all need to be asking old people more questions and listening to their stories. I think that maybe that's what the most important lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much wisdom,
Hmm.
and we have a tendency to not pay attention to it,
Hmm.
because they lived through a time when things were not easy,
Hmm.
things were not as accessible as a phone, uh,
Hmm.
where now anybody that has a phone has access to the world, essentially.
Hmm.
Um, so the life stories that are there, is just rich with color
Yeah.
and experience. Um, After you get finished with this documentary that you're working on, did you work on any other documentaries that made a real impression on you compared to?
No, well, not exactly. This they did produce a documentary about a boy named Matty Stepanek. I think that was his name. Who was a child who had a very, very rare and serious um disease. I don't remember exactly. It was like a muscle wasting disease.
Okay.
Um, and he wrote poetry and just kind of like people really responded to his poetry, and he ended up getting published, and then he was, I think, on like Good Morning America, and like
Yeah.
and he did die. He died, I think, at age 13 or 14. I'm not sure how old he was.
Mm,
But the director I worked for made a film about him. And I did
yeah.
meet this boy briefly once. And again, it was a case of like a very brief encounter leaving a deep impression on me.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. It seems like I remember something like that kind of story. That
Hmm.
name sounded familiar.
Yeah.
At what point in your working journey do you get the opportunity to step into working in something that you're going to shift your perspective of, oh, I think this is where I want to go?
Hmm. Well, definitely I had always dreamed of moving to New York City and working in book publishing. Big surprise, right?
Sure.
Uh, but I always was too intimidated because I didn't know anybody in New York. I didn't know anybody in publishing. And so I felt I just didn't even know where to start, I guess.
Yeah.
But a couple things happened. So first of all, when I was in grad school, I one of my papers that I wrote was about artists who defected from the Soviet bloc
Okay.
during the
Yeah.
Cold War. And I interviewed a few of those artists. And one of those artists was a children's book illustrator named Peter Sees. He's very well known. Um, and he was the only person I knew who worked in publishing.
Okay.
And so what was, oh yeah, what happened is that I met my current husband when I was still living in DC. He was an art student studying photography, and he's actually Japanese. That's why I have a Japanese last name.
Okay.
And we met right as he was graduating, and he had a visa that allowed him to stay for 1 year after he graduated to like a working permit, and then he
Yeah.
would have to go back to Japan. And so he wanted to move to New York because that's where all the photography action was happening.
Right.
And I thought to myself, like, oh, this is my chance. I'm gonna go with this guy that I just met. We're gonna move to New York. So I moved with him and immediately started looking for a job in publishing. And one of the things I did is I called up this illustrator that I knew and I asked if I could get some advice from him. And I was practically, shaking as I was talking on the phone. And, I was
Right.
so nervous. But he
Yeah.
was super nice. He's like, yes, come to my studio. So his studio was in Little Italy. I still remember, climbing up the stairs and being in this amazing artist studio. Um, and he was super nice and he gave me a lot of names. He's like, call this person, talk to this person. So I did what he told me and ended up talking to a bunch of people. And basically, through this game of telephone, talking to various people, I ended up getting a job at Scholastic.
Okay. Okay. And said that you started out in the art department rather
hmm
than the other department.
hmm Yeah, what happened is that I had an interview with a guy named Arthur Levine, who is a very well-known editor. He's actually the person who brought Harry Potter to the United States.
Okay.
And we had a lot of fun talking about children's literature. This was my informational interview, not for a job or anything like that.
Got you.
And then he said, okay, I'll keep your resume, on file. And if anything comes up, I'll let you know. And then he did reach out to me. I don't remember how much time went by, but a little while later, and he said, well, there's a job opening with the creative director in the art department. Would you be interested? And I said, sure. And so that is the job that I ended up getting.
Okay. Okay. And how was that working with a art director, um, in terms of the dynamic of someone who's controlling all of the department in terms of every individual who's creating something and working on a piece that all eventually comes together as a whole.
So his role, the creative director, was basically the boss of, like you said, all the art directors and all the graphic designers. And it's, very hierarchical. So there's the creative director, and then there's like the hardcover art director, and the picture book art director, and the paperback art director. And then under them, they have individual graphic designers. And so my job was kind of like a secretary slash extremely junior designer.
Okay.
So, on the one hand, I was kind of helping with his calendar and meetings and going through his mail and answering correspondence, that kind of thing. And then on the other hand, he was still designing some books. So I would do very simple kind of laying things out and InDesign,
Okay.
kind of the barest minimum of getting things ready. And then he would go in and do the final design.
Got you. Okay. Okay. With moving into that um, setting at
hmm
Scholastica, when did you see the opportunity to pivot out of the art department into the other department where you had a little bit more to do in terms of what you set out for in your career?
Yeah. I think that I always kind of knew editorial was probably the right place for me because I really love talent scouting and I
Okay.
love
Yeah.
development, story development. And I honestly feel like I'm not nitpicky enough to be a good graphic designer because I think really great graphic designers are very detail oriented and I'm just not. Um, so I knew fairly quickly that I probably needed to shift out of there, um, but I love my boss. He's a great guy, and he's actually still at Scholastic. And um, while I was working for him, I read a graphic novel called Blankets by Craig Thompson, which is an amazing graphic novel. It's been very influential across the field with many people. And that book is what made me remember all these comics I read as a kid and think to myself,
Right.
wait a second, why are children's book publishers not publishing comics? Because
Right.
comics is a really, like I said, it's a different way of telling a story than prose. And
Yep.
it's not a picture book. It's different from a picture book. You can tell more sophisticated stories in comics.
Yep.
So I talked to my boss about it, and he thought, yeah, that totally makes sense. So we ended up talking to the publisher about it, and she said, well, if you think this is such a great idea, why don't you write up a memo proposing what you would do if you were to pursue this? So we wrote up a memo about like what would it mean to start an imprint that was focused on graphic novels for kids.
Right.
And she ended up giving the green light for it. And so at some point, I transitioned into editorial. I don't remember exactly how it
Yeah.
happened, but it was somewhere in that process.
Got you. Well, that's a number one. It's an amazing thing because what it shows is you you remembered that experience from childhood of those comics that weren't superhero
Hmm.
stories, right? And how that imprinted into your mind in terms of the way you were reading things and seeing a story play out. And then you present an idea that really isn't even explored
Hmm.
in America and American publication at that point in time. And because of you, so much of your interest in it and how it affected you, you're able to put together this proposal of this is what it can look like, and you get the go ahead, which
Hmm.
a lot of times um, individuals don't always take those opportunities,
Hmm.
especially in the creative fields. Um, Again, a lot of it has to do with those hierarchical structures that are
Hmm.
in place that don't allow for that. Um, but a lot of times, I think there's ideas out there that are fantastic ideas that
Hmm.
just never get to fruition because the individual who has the idea doesn't believe it in enough and within themselves to present it.
Exactly. You have to believe in yourself, which is huge, huge, huge. And I feel like I've been through periods in my life where I did believe in myself, and then there's been periods in my life when I did not believe in myself.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've had that roll out across the story today, which
Yeah.
is fantastic. So again, from my perspective, I'm like, okay, this is a cool opportunity to be able to do this. And then, um, it, as we said in the intro, it made a pivotal shift for them in terms of the way that they were going to move forward with
Yeah,
that.
it's actually the graphics imprint, I believe, is one of the most profitable areas of Scholastic whole business now.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. Um, and to be somebody who presented that idea, this is the thing that I try to get creatives to think about with this podcast as well. Is there's plenty of opportunity if you're in something that's not really the thing that you love, even though it's a part of what you love.
Mhm.
If you take the step to move and look at another direction, it can change a
Mhm.
whole lot of things. It
Mhm.
potentially an industry, potentially the world.
Mhm.
Um, Not to just always think that where you're at is the only place that it's ever going to be,
Mhm.
because you can take your creative talents and broaden the scope because it
Mhm.
can play across many different industries if you're just willing to think creatively and
Mhm.
how that you can implement that kind
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say probably most people who we see at the top of their fields are very creative. even if the field itself one doesn't think of it as a creative field.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That creative thinking has to be in play at some point,
Mhm.
especially if it's a business that's just about, you know, selling towels.
Mhm. Mhm.
You got to figure out a creative way to sell a towel.
Yes.
So it does have to come in at some point. Um, what after Scholastics, rather,
Mhm.
um, what opened up the opportunity to work for Diamond Book Distributors?
Oh, well, opened up the opportunity was the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008.
Wonderful world event.
Yes, yes. So what happened is that around 2007, um, gosh, I'm trying to remember my chronology. Um, the well, publishing got hit really hard, like every industry got hit really hard,
Yeah,
and there were layoffs and reorgs and canceled projects, and things were going crazy. And Scholastic was just like all the other, if not worse, maybe in some ways. So the person who gave the green light to graphics, the publisher, got fired, and then
ouch.
her boss, who was like the president of the division, retired, but I'm not sure, it might have been a voluntary, like, I'm getting out of here when I can.
Yeah,
And this other person got brought in, and I really didn't like what things that she did. Um, and then so many people got laid off that I respected, and I was really upset. And then this new person wanted to move me from my job that I was really happy in to do
yeah,
something else. And I just was like, I'm gonna get out of here. I was so mad.
right,
So I
right.
started just talking to people I knew. And then a friend of mine was the head of Diamond Book Distributors. And he's like, why don't you come work for me and you can start up this new kids division? So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I left Scholastic and went to Diamond.
Nice,
That's what
nice.
happened.
And once you get into that environment, did you immediately see, as you did at Scholastic, the opportunity to really open up a lane with them as well?
Oh, no, I got profoundly depressed. I
Oh,
really, really lost my way. I initially was doing my best, but I kind of felt like I was banging my head against a brick wall because most of the publishers that I was talking to they were kind of like, yeah, we'll look at children's material, sure. But it wasn't anywhere near something that they cared about. And it was something I cared passionately about. I mean,
sure.
but because books were like, I feel like in a way they saved my life when I was young because I was a
Yeah,
very lonely, very confused child, and I felt like I found books that spoke to me and
yeah,
helped, gave me hope and made me realize there's people out there that understand me. They're like me.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so I was so passionate about books, and then to be talking to these people and realizing like they're not. I mean, I had one meeting with DC Comics where they like in my face basically said to me, "You can just stop talking now because we're just not interested."
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Um,
Well, not like saying it right up front and
yes, yes.
bold
So
as ever.
yeah, and then I really didn't know what to do. I was so confused because I knew that I loved on working with writers and artists on books that they cared about and that I cared about. But I'd had such a bad experience in the corporate world. And then I was having another kind of bad experience. It's still corporate, but I mean, I don't know if you know the ins and outs of the comics industry, but Diamond actually declared bankruptcy earlier this year, and it's a huge, huge drama in the comics
Really?
world because they were a
Yeah.
very big player, and there's a lot of bad things that turns out or happen behind the scenes. Um,
Okay.
but that all came in the future, but I feel like even when I was there, I could kind of glimpse some things that seemed kind of
Just
off
where?
to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so so I basically felt like I'm not happy. I'm profoundly unhappy, but I don't know what else to do because I feel like I am working in the industry that I should be working in, but I'm not happy. So what's going on?
Yeah.
Um, so actually I ended up quitting without anything. I quit.
Okay.
And my husband's a photographer, so I decided I would run his business for him because he did need help with that.
Gotcha.
But it wasn't really my passion. And um, so I feel like I spent several years after leaving Diamond extremely depressed.
Okay.
It was like a 5-year period of my life. Also, I didn't mention my father died. He got lung cancer
Oh,
well, he actually was diagnosed with lung cancer when I was pregnant with my first child, but
okay.
nobody told me because they were afraid of how it would impact me. And so I found out the day that I brought my daughter home from the hospital. My parents came and my father told me, and it was just horrible. So all these things were actually happening all at the same time, and that's why I can't remember the
Yeah,
exact
no,
chronology correctly.
that's under that's completely understandable. They didn't tell you right away,
Mhm.
but when they do tell you, it's still almost inopportune as well because you're just
Yeah, yeah, it was a
home.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure whether they might have done the right thing because it was a huge shock and um I did get sick actually. And maybe, maybe it would have been bad if, I could have had a miscarriage. I'm not sure. I don't know.
No, for sure, for sure. It, yeah, the I think it's a multiple-sided coin rather than a two-sided coin in
Mhm.
that situation. There's just too many factors in play with it. I can empathize with that. I lost my father at the end of 2021 um,
Um,
to lung disease,
mm,
not cancer, but lung disease from years of smoking and then also to working in the auto industry
mhm,
as
mhm.
a mechanic, and then in parts and being around all of those products that many of them early on in the 70s had asbestos in them and all that
Yes.
kind of stuff. So
Yeah, my father had mesothelioma, which is from asbestos exposure, which he got from working in an asbestos factory for a summer when he was a teenager.
wow,
Yeah.
wow, that early on,
Yep.
man, it's a horrible thing. We There's many things within our society that make things easier to produce, but ultimately are not really good for us environmentally or health wise.
Mhm,
Plastics being a huge one as well.
mhm,
Just for ease of production, more profit
mhm,
coming out the other side of it. It's crazy. It's touched many, many lives
mhm,
in a bad way.
mhm.
With this time period of depression and this depressed state, was there anything during that time that was like a little glimmer of light that would show up for you that helped you continue to get through to the next day?
Um, well, I know very clearly what helped me ultimately get out of it, but that's a little different than your question.
Okay.
I mean, I think my, well, at that time, I had only my daughter. My son came later. But having a young child who kids are hilarious. They bring a smile to my face. So I think she was probably the closest to that. Yeah.
Okay. And how about the other thing that,
Oh, the other thing was that so what's the exact okay. When I'm gonna tell the whole anecdote because it's kind of funny. So when I was bringing my daughter to a fair in town, like one of those street fairs,
yeah,
there was a karate school that was holding demonstrations. And so
okay.
we went to the demo and we put our name on their little mailing list. And then they reached out to me through the mailing list actually the day before Thanksgiving and said that they were having a free exercise class on Thanksgiving morning to
Jeez.
get you ready for the holiday season or whatever. And I didn't really have a lot of time to think about it, but I was like, I don't have any plans tomorrow morning. Like I could actually go to this exercise class. And I
Right.
just decided I'm gonna go. I
Okay.
think I knew in the back of my mind that like exercise would probably be good for me.
Yeah.
So I went to that exercise class and it completely like destroyed me. By the end of the class, I was like barely able to breathe. It was a little bit like a CrossFit style, just
Okay.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
like really intense calisthenics. It wasn't karate. It was different.
All
Um,
right.
but I actually like liked it, and I thought to myself, well, maybe I should take this class. So it worked. Their marketing worked with me. I signed
Right.
up for the class, and I ended up going to this exercise class, and I really attribute that to being the initial pivot for me, like just getting out of the house and moving my body and just
Yes.
in my body. Um,
Yeah.
so that kind of like shifted something inside of me somehow.
Yeah.
And so at the same time, I started thinking like, I really I need help. I need a therapist or mental health help somehow.
Okay.
And I had been interested in meditation for a long time.
All right.
And also in town, I saw that there was this little sign for that said mindfulness-based stress reduction, which
Mhm.
is actually a very specific meditation program. Um,
Yes.
and I was really interested in it, so I called the number, and it turned out they were starting an 8-week like meditation course. So I signed up for that course, and I think that course was huge for me. It really, really helped me see the monkey mind. It helped me see like how
Yes.
my thoughts were racing, and that my thoughts weren't me.
Right.
Somehow I could step back and see my own thoughts. And that separation, oh my God, it just blew my mind open. And I ended up taking the exact same course twice just because I felt like I needed it to learn it better. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say that I'm a consistent meditator, but I do draw on the skills that I learned in that course quite often.
Okay. Yeah.
Occasionally I will sit and meditate, and I wish I did it more often. I wish I did it every day. But yeah, meditation was huge for me. So I would say exercise, meditation, and then the third thing is self-help books. I'm
All
a
right.
reader, so I've
Yeah.
read many, many self-help books, and some of them are really, really good. Some of them are amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Excellent. Well, we know um, from the mental health side of the community and different aspects and things that they um, convey are things that can help bring you out of a depressed state. Those three things are definitely on the list.
yeah,
Um, I would probably venture to say that the exercise or moving the body
Mhm.
is probably higher up than the meditation or the self-help books,
Mhm.
just because it changes the flow of endorphins.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that in and of itself is very helpful for the brain and brain health. The other element that I thought was very interesting when you were talking about the meditation was that you were able to shift back and realize that what was taking place in your mind wasn't really you,
Mhm.
which takes me all the way back again to
Mhm.
that little girl who was
Yeah.
looking at herself
Yeah.
not in first person but in second or third person,
Yeah.
um, which is interesting that that played out then,
Mhm.
and then you were able to reconnect with that in a different way later on in life that
Yeah.
helped shift your mindset.
Yeah.
Which, when we were talking in the beginning, you thought that was kind of strange,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
yet in reality, it's not strange at all. It's
Yeah,
just another
you're right.
way of
Yes.
thinking things, just another way of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once you uh, start to come out of this depressed state and you're working with your husband, um, helping him with his photography business, what is the thing that pops into your head of, I think I'm going to try something different at this point?
Well, I got this consulting job with the New York City Department of Education because I was friends with somebody in the office and they needed, I can't even remember exactly why, but for some reason they had this initiative and something to do with the internal regulations. They needed to hire somebody outside of the office to run
Okay.
this program.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And she thought of me, so she came and asked if I'd be interested.
Uh-huh.
And I was interested, and I also needed money. So I said, yes, I'll do that. So I started working with them. And basically what that job did is it put me right back into the children's book world but in a very different way. So I was
Sure.
working with librarians and basically the job was to come up with reading lists for every single age, for every grade level that
Okay.
were books for fun. So these were supposed to be books that teachers and librarians could recommend that had nothing to do with the curriculum, just to get kids in to enjoy reading.
Yeah.
And so I was working with a small team of librarians, just going through tons and tons of books and then figuring out the books that we would compile into a short list. And we had to be thinking in our head, like, there should be books for boys, there should be books for girls, books for kids who like mystery, books for kids who like science, like kind of trying to be as cover all the bases, but with a very small number of books. So
Right.
it was a very fun project, and I got to know a lot of great librarians through that job. But most importantly, I was reading tons and tons of books and just getting so excited and remembering what it was like to work with the authors and illustrators. And I just felt like I have to get back into this. Like, this is where I belong. I'm so happy here. I love these working on these, but I don't want to be the one, vetting lists. I want to be like getting in and into the dirty part and like making the book. So,
Right.
um, so I did consider like, could I go back and get a job as an editor again? And I did apply for a few positions, but kind of half-heartedly because for a couple of reasons. Number one, I didn't really want to go back to the corporate world. And then number two, I also felt like I was a very unlikely candidate to get hired because I'd been out of the industry for a number of years at that point. And
Okay.
things change and
Sure.
you kind of no longer are seen as very valuable on your resume if there's like a long gap between
Right.
positions.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like I probably had to do something on my own, but at the same time, I uh didn't know what that would be, and I also didn't have any money. So I didn't have any startup capital whatsoever. I really needed to earn money. And I went back and forth and back and forth, and And actually, I also should mention I was doing some freelance editing on the side. I had created
Okay.
a website and I took a course. I took a how to start your online business course.
All
Um,
right.
and that's what sort of gave me the gumption to put up a website for myself as like a writing coach.
Gotcha.
And I was still doing that. And then our financial situation got a little bit acute. And I was like, oh my God, I have to get a job. So I just applied to a bunch of jobs in my local area. And I actually got hired to work in an insurance company, in
Oh,
the
wow.
marketing department of an insurance company.
All right.
And I went into that job, and within, I would say like the first day, I just felt sick. Like I felt nauseous. I felt like I
I
couldn't
felt sick when you
breathe.
said it.
I felt like I was just everything was my whole body was just screaming at me,
Yeah.
don't do this, don't do this.
Right.
Yeah, it was the most, like The Office, the TV show, The Office. It was kind of like that, but worse.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It was a small, probably like maybe 20, 15 people worked there. The fluorescent lighting, the cubicles, and
Oh,
like the boss's office off to the side. And um, oh, such not my scene at all. Um, but luckily I had negotiated when I first started the job. We had this family vacation planned, going to Japan to visit my husband's family. And
okay.
we had the tickets and everything. So when they offered me the job, I said, "Well, I can start, but I'm going on a family vacation. Is it okay if I work for a week, do my vacation, and then come back and continue working?" And they're like, "Okay, well, I guess you already have the tickets. Okay, it's acceptable." So I worked for that week and then I went away to Japan. And that was such a good thing because I got, thousands of miles of separation from my life.
Right. Yeah.
And when I was in Japan, it just hit me like a freight train, like, I can't do this job. I'm miserable. I already know I'm miserable. And I know what I want to do. I know I want to work in children's books. It's clear as day. I just need to have to, figure out how to make it work. Um,
Right.
and so I just decided I'm gonna become a literary agent. To me, that was like the obvious thing to do. Um,
Okay.
I had mixed feelings about it. I mean, people had been saying to me over the years, like, you should become a literary agent because you're so good at working with writers and artists, and you know lots of people. And
Right.
the thing that had always prevented me from doing it is that the idea of negotiating contracts sounded like
Ah,
torture to me.
yes.
And that's a big part of the job. So
It's it's torture for us creators as well.
yes, yes. Um, but what happened is that I made this decision that I was going to do it anyway. And then kind of, how the universe like makes things fall into place once you make decisions.
Yeah.
I went to a networking event that like shortly after we got back. Well, first of all, I quit my job while I was in Japan. I sent an email
Excellent.
saying, I apologize profusely from the bottom of my heart, but I discovered while being away that I am afraid I cannot continue in this job. And so
Oh,
uh, that made me feel a million times better. And then, um, and then I went to this networking event, and at the event, I met a woman who was starting a publishing company. So
oh
we were
wow.
chatting about it. And the question that occurred to me was like, how did you come up with your contracts? Because obviously you have to have contracts for your books. And I asked her, and then she said, "Oh, I have this amazing consultant. I really like her. She designed all the boilerplate with me. She's wonderful." And I was like, "What's her name?" So she gave me that person's name, and then I reached out to her, and she was really great. And she told me how she works, and she's like, "Yeah, if you want to work with me, it's just an hourly rate and whatever." So I was like, "Okay, I have this in my back pocket. I think I could do this."
Okay.
That's what really allowed me to take the leap.
Excellent. Excellent. One of the things that I was interested in, kind of right off the bat, when you mentioned your husband, and thinking about your early experience of uh, being in Germany and experiencing German culture.
Mhm.
Um, Once you got married and now you're experiencing Japanese culture as well, did did you see any of the cultural influence on meditation come into play when you were looking at meditation as a way to come out of that depression?
Um, yes and no. My husband specifically, he's not like me in that respect. He doesn't
Okay,
he always says his meditation is riding his mountain bike. That's
yeah,
the way that he goes into the woods and rides his mountain bike.
fair
Um,
enough.
he's not really a spiritual person. I would say I'm an extremely spiritual person.
Okay, gotcha.
I guess I would say I'm kind of a seeker. Like I've always been
Yes,
interested in religion and spirituality and reading about it.
yeah,
Um, and I think I did kind of experiment when I was in my 20s. I went to church, various churches sometimes, just out of curiosity. And I
all
did
right,
do some volunteer work with a Catholic charity organization, even though I'm not Catholic. And
okay.
actually, I even went to a retreat at a convent once. I just remembered.
Oh,
Wow. Um, yeah. You know why I think I really explored the Catholic thing is because my boss at the documentary film company that I worked, he was Catholic, very strongly Catholic, and
okay,
but very much the type of uh religious person who is open-minded and like kind of sees the universal aspects of religion.
right. Yes,
Um, so
the good ones.
yes, yes. Um, so yeah, but then Buddhism is something that I've always been interested in, and I mean ultimately I would say I've concluded that of all the world religions, Buddhism is definitely the one that I feel closest. Um, I don't know,
Just aligns with your.
affinity. Yeah, it
Yeah,
aligns with the way I see the world the most.
yeah,
Yeah. So, and Buddhism is an Asian religion, and I do see that when I go to Japan, I see as the influence. Well, I see both it going both ways. Like I see Buddhist influence in Japan, and then I see how how Buddhism changed in Japan due to Japanese culture's influence on it.
yes, yeah, for sure. When you get into this position of being an agent,
Mhm.
how quickly does that progress for you before you decide to start your own company in 2020? Was it because of the pandemic that you decided to do that, or was it because of the environment that you were in?
Well, I actually started my own company right away. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, I basically put the pieces in place in the fall of 2019 and
Got you.
officially announced my new business in January of 2020.
Okay.
And I had actually sold two projects before I officially opened my agency. Basically, they were projects I had originally been working on as a freelance like coach slash editor.
All
And
right.
and I sold them, I don't know how, like I wouldn't say like under the table, but because it wasn't that, but without being formally having a
Sure.
formal agency.
Just a freelance scenario.
Yes, exactly.
Got
Uh,
you.
so yeah, it all happened before the pandemic, but then of course the pandemic affected everything drastically. What I
Yes.
had been counting on is that my husband's business would kind of carry us a little bit while I kind of built up my business. But
Yeah.
the pandemic destroyed his business because he's a wedding photographer. And so
Oh,
everything died, like all his income just
yes.
not, actually it was worse than that because he had to return deposits to people who had, put down a deposit for a wedding that was coming in the future.
Yeah.
We had like negative revenue flow.
Oh, my word.
So, and as an agent, the way it works is that you don't get paid until you've sold something. So
Yeah.
it's completely spec work up front
Yep.
until you get to the point that you actually get an offer from a publisher. So our family financial situation was very dire. And luckily, I had started this meetup thing that had morphed into an online community exactly at the same time that I started my agency.
Okay.
And that's Kids Comics Unite. And what I decided to do is I started offering a free office hour on Zoom once a week through
Gotcha.
Kids Comics Unite. And basically, I had no agenda. I would just show up on Zoom, and anybody who wants to come, we would just hang out. Because people at that time were so freaked out. Nobody knew what was going on.
Right.
And we were all separated from each other. And so I felt like if I can just open up a space where we can be together, something good is going to come out of it. I don't know what it's going to be, but um,
Right.
and so people started coming, and that kind of kicked off this organic growth thing with the community where people were spreading the word, like, oh, there's this cool Zoom you can go to join this community. Um,
Right.
and then I thought, well, okay, now I have this small critical mass of people who are the exact type of people that I focus on. So
Yep.
I'm going to teach a course to them. So I launched a course called Kids Comics Intensive, which is basically like a 101 how to get started in the kids graphic novel world, like understanding the form and understanding publishing and all that kind of thing.
Okay.
And I made about 20 something $1,000 from launching that course, which to me was huge. That completely blew my mind open. Oh my
Right.
God, this is this is a business. I could make money from this.
Yeah.
So that changed my whole thinking about what Kids Comics Unite was. So it went from being just this like fun thing that I'm doing just to hang out with other people that I like to being a business that I actually needed to keep afloat and needed.
Yeah.
So fast forward 5 years later, I now have two businesses that are both, I would say, equally demanding.
Right. For sure.
And I did not intend to have two businesses.
Amazing how the universe throws things at you, right?
Yes.
When you started the online community, had you found Mighty Networks prior to doing that, and is that what
Yes, I
progressed that
somebody
further?
told me about it in the fall of 2019. I don't remember how I found out about it, but when I looked at it, I was like, "Oh, this is like Facebook groups." And I don't like Facebook and I don't want to be on Facebook. So, oh, if I make an account on this platform, I don't have to use Facebook.
Yeah,
So that was my whole thinking.
the way many think
Yeah.
when they're joining, for sure, for sure. Um, had you looked at Patreon at all prior to that?
Not for myself. I mean, I
Okay,
I know about it because a lot of artists that I work with do use
yeah,
Patreon. Yeah.
yeah, okay, okay. Um, Now that you're into it, and in the midst of uh, the pandemic, you're kind of in the height of it as this is
Mhm.
expanding for you. Um, what are your thoughts in terms of coming out of the pandemic? Of okay, now that this has been just online, how am I going to shift to this, shift with this, as now it's starting to open back up to where I can actually see somebody face to face potentially.
Um, it's funny because to me it feels like it was a very gradual thing and almost, like things changed, one thing changed and then one thing opened up and then so it wasn't sudden. So I can't really look back and identify like a moment where I felt that okay, now things are different.
Okay. So it was just a continuous movement scenario of
Yeah.
you're building the community and it's still just online and then it's kind of just expanding out from there.
I would say the thing that has changed for me the most has been my feelings about my two businesses, which
Okay.
have gone through quite a roller coaster of feelings. I think,
Sure.
people often talk about the dip when you're creating something, and I feel very strongly that I had that dip I've had it kind of at different periods with both of my businesses.
Yeah.
But more so with the agency because um it's like I said, the contract part was a very steep learning curve for me, and it's not something I would ever do for fun. So there was a large part of my job that was challenging and not fun. And so after, I would say like after a couple years, I started really second guessing myself and saying like, why did I, if I had only known, like if I had known I could have had Kids Comics Unite, I never would have started this agency. I would have focused only on Kids Comics Unite. But
Gotcha.
now I have both of them and I'm like really attached to my clients at my agency and I don't want to leave them. And so I'm like, "Ugh, what do I do? What do I do? Um,
Right.
and I guess I kind of didn't resolve it necessarily. I just kept plugging away because I had so many things I needed to do every day and every week and every month that I just kept chipping away. And then about I guess maybe 9 to 12 months ago, I feel like I sort of started sitting back and realizing, actually, I don't feel that way the way I used to about the agency anymore. I don't feel that sense of stress or, I mean, there's
Okay.
definitely moments of stress. It's impossible to have any
For
business
sure.
or life, live life without stress, without conflict, without problems. But,
Yeah.
but I didn't feel that same sense of anxiety, I guess, overarching anxiety about it.
All right.
And I realized, oh, it's because I'm learning. It's because I'm getting skills. I'm actually I'm not the same person as I was a couple years ago. So it's I don't love contracts, but now I can look at a contract without feeling that internal like you know,
Right.
I can be
Yeah.
like, okay, I know how this works. I know what each of these clauses is about. I know where they're trying to like pull a fast one on me and I can
Right.
push back on that and I can push back on it without feeling the emotional attachment. I think
Yes.
that's maybe the key part of it. Um, so so it's become a part of my job that I don't love, but I can do it
Right.
perfectly well. And because I can do it perfectly well, it gives me the bandwidth to do the things that I do love and that do bring me joy and light me up.
For sure. Can let's talk if we can um, about that contract process
Hmm.
a little bit for the individual on the other side of the screen or listening device that's paying attention to us today.
Hmm.
How can we emphasize how tremendously important it is for all the parties to have a contract in place?
Yes, yes, contracts are very, very important, sadly.
Right. And for the creative, whether it's the writer or it's the illustrator um, that's conceptualizing this idea, for them, what is the benefit and asset for them that they need to know? Why is this contract important, that it's in place for the future of their idea?
Well, I mean, you're starting with intellectual property. So your idea is your intellectual property. And a contract, we often say that like I sold the rights to this company for my book or whatever, but the truth is you didn't actually sell the rights. You licensed the rights. So that's what the contract is. It's a license. So it's giving somebody permission to do a specific thing with your idea and the contract lays out the limitations of what they can and they cannot do with your idea at its basic.
Perfect. Yes. And that's huge for the creatives. And I don't think it's emphasized enough in the the writing or illustrating community, um, because from the music perspective,
Mhm.
we've seen so many different scenarios where those contracts either destroy an artist's career or they control an artist's career for
Mhm.
decades,
Mhm.
um, and how skewed that is in the direction of the record labels, the management, all of those different things. So that's why I wanted to bring that up for writers and illustrators that are working within the publishing world.
Mhm.
Um, for the process of an individual who might want to get into either writing or illustrating, um, working with one or the other, or somehow connecting, what would be the easiest process for an individual who is unfamiliar with the industry to begin with? What would be maybe an easy first step?
I think an easy first step would be to find some sort of a group in your local area of other people who are interested in that same area.
Okay.
So if you are a children's book person, there's an organization called the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and it has chapters all over, not only all over the United States, but all over the world. And you can meet other people in your local area who are also interested in that. Um, Beyond that, in the world of comics, there's all different types of shows you can go to meet people. So you could go to like an indie comics show, or you could go to a Comic Con, which is more like mainstream comics.
Yeah.
Um, there's like zine festivals for super underground alternative stuff. So yeah, it all depends on what you're interested in, but finding other people who are into the same thing as you is the number one thing I would recommend.
Okay. Um, in terms of the process of edits and back and forth that go into creating a book or a story, um, or a series of stories, um, is there anything that you would say in terms of encouragement to the writers, the illustrators, um, to help them look at that process from a perspective of this is going to happen
Mhm.
and you just need to prepare for these potentials to take
Mhm.
place?
Well, the potential that I would say is not a potential, but an inevitability, a certainty, is that you will get rejected. That's just normal. That is gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so just I sometimes tell people like instead of putting your work out into the world and thinking like I hope somebody likes this or I hope somebody picks it up or whatever, just maybe think of it as how many rejections can I get? Because that means you're really putting it out there, you know? Uh,
Right.
so sorry, like I think I lost your question.
No, that's all right. What I was going for was the inevitabilities of what is going to take place when you get into the process of either being the illustrator for a writer or being the writer for an illustrator and collabing together.
Oh, collaborations. Such a big topic. I don't even know where to start practically. Um,
For
Collaborations are great. Again, I would say going back to like finding your people, whether it could be locally, it could be online. Of course, there's many online
yeah,
places that you can meet people who
yeah,
are kindred spirits. But I love collaborations because I think that's a great way to, it's always scary to put your work on a silver platter and present it to the world and say, "What do you think, world?"
yeah.
But if you're doing it with another person, that makes it a little less scary. So I think anything you can do to just get yourself past that fear or that vulnerability, do it. And I think baby steps are always the way to go. So a lot of us have in our head like the great American novel or the huge ambitious seven
Right.
volume epic fantasy we're gonna write, But
Yeah.
maybe start with just a zine or start with a short story or start with some little thing that you can create and give to friends,
Yeah.
whatever it might be. Just the most important thing I think is to step one, make something, and step two, put it into the world somehow.
Yeah. That was perfect. That was perfect. Um, because there's two things that came out of that response for me that I think are phenomenal. Secondly, was that direct input. The first one was the mindset of just thinking of it, how many rejections can I get?
Hmm.
Because that is going to happen 100% guaranteed. There's
Hmm.
no way around it.
Hmm.
Um, that is a that was that is probably the easiest bet that you could ever make if you had to go to Vegas
Yes.
and put money down.
Yes.
It would be you're going to get rejected at a point in time.
Yes.
Um, but if they can think of that from the beginning, I think that might alleviate some of the anticipatory anxiety that
Hmm.
comes into play when you're creating something and thinking, I got to put this out there.
Yeah.
Um, because it shifts the mind into um, wanting to be liked from the beginning,
Mhm.
and it almost makes you be confident in the fact that this is what I've got, this is what I've created. I'm going to get rejected, so let me see how many times I can get rejected so I can try to figure out how to possibly represent this.
Yes, yes. I think having an experimental approach is extremely helpful. I'm just experimenting. I'm trying this. I'm going to see what happens.
Yeah,
Um, I was thinking while you were talking about going back to much earlier in our conversation about sports and what
yeah,
I said about watching my daughter go through sports and seeing how, losing or
yes,
failing and then having to pick yourself up and try again, how important that lesson is. And I think for me, because I wasn't involved in sports and didn't learn that lesson. I actually learned the opposite lesson because I was good at school and I got rewarded for getting A's and like doing really well on tests. And I internalized this message that if you get a B or if you get a bad grade, that's bad. You should not fail. You should not make mistakes.
right.
And that is the worst lesson to teach people. That is a absolute terrible, horrible lesson. And I feel like
For
our
sure.
society still teaches that. And
Oh, yeah.
that is that is guaranteed to keep people back and hold them back.
Yes, absolutely. Um, it, what's fascinating to me as well here in this conversation is not often do I have a guest when I'm drawing lines back and forth in the conversation. Do I have a guest do the same thing? So it's very refreshing to see, okay, you're tracking with me. I can see that little storyteller. um, that's great. That's great. Um, another thing for uh, individuals who might be trying to get into this field of doing children's books, young adult graphic novels,
Mhm.
how beneficial is it to potentially have an agent or someone like yourself to work with versus them trying to do it all on their own? Because there's two things at play that can be beneficial from both sides of it, but there's also a huge benefit in the symbiosis of the connectedness that comes together with that.
Yeah, I think it's very beneficial to have an agent. for the reasons you described. On the one hand, well, to be honest, it's very difficult to get a book deal without an agent because most publishers, most, not all, but most publishers require an agent to be pitching. Um,
Yeah.
but also, like you said, there's the mm, emotional, artistic benefit of having somebody who's in your court and somebody who to bounce ideas off of, somebody
Right.
to give you honest feedback. That's really immensely beneficial. But I do understand that it's hard to get an agent because there's only so many agents and there's many, many, many artists out there who
Yeah.
want to break in. So I think before you're at that stage where you have gotten an agent, there's still other ways I think to build relationships that will be helpful for you. So that again, going back to like finding people in who are
Yeah.
interested in the same thing, it's so important. You often find that groups of creators, like if you look at well-known authors and illustrators that you admire in certain fields, you'll often find they know each other, they all know each other, and
Yeah.
oftentimes they met before they were famous, before they were successful.
Yeah.
They all kind of rose up together. And so you never know the people that you're making friends with now, 10 years from now, where all of you will be together. And hopefully you'll all be rising up together.
Yeah. That was perfect. I think that's a fantastic summation for us to kind of close out today. And one of the things that I always try to bring to the focus at the close of a episode for the audience is to listen to your heart, but always be kind to your mind.
I love that.